We promised on January 3rd that we would try to answer some of the questions that were sent in as a result of the Tim Keller video on the prodigal son. So that's what we're here to do today, and we'll just take a few minutes and try to answer each one of these questions. Someone asked whether the title of this whole parable shouldn't be the story of a father's unfailing love, and I think that that's probably good. The prodigal son is not a title that Jesus gave it. That's a title that people who have interpreted the scriptures have given it. And they're just categorizing his parables in particular ways. So I think it's very appropriate to look at the father's love, because he does appeal to both sons and wants both of them to enter into the feast and into his joy. And it's obvious when Rembrandt painted that famous picture of the prodigal son, the father is certainly probably the central figure of passion and compassion in the story. So I don't think there's any problem with calling it that at all, although traditionally we've called it the prodigal son. Another question, why is it so easy to just go through the motions of being a good elder brother or a good Christian? Because it's easy just to live with laws and rules and regulations and habits and even disciplines, and to live externally and just to have an external faith experience, going to church but not really worshiping God, reading your Bible and just checking it off. What the Lord wants is our heart. He wants us to be committed to the deeper passions and pursuits of a yearning for Him, thirsting for Him. And so all external religion is a lot easier because it doesn't require a heart commitment, a life of faith, a life of trust, even when things don't go well. So I think that's the basic reason for that. What does it mean when it says the father fell on his neck? It must have been an expression in the New Testament of great affection, of hugging him and of kissing him and maybe weeping over him. And so here's a father that was unbelievably relieved that his son had come home. Does God do the same thing? Does He weep over us in that same way? Well, maybe not quite like that, but I think the Bible does say that there's rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents. So obviously there is positive hopefulness and encouragement that might be seen very much like a father weeping on the neck of a son. Will older brothers be surprised at judgment? I think the answer is yes, because older brothers depend on their own righteousness, their own goodness, their own ability to keep the law and to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of religion. And they think that's what they're going to present to God. This is what they're going to bring for their acceptance. And I think elder brothers will have said to them probably the worst thing that anybody could hear: depart from me, I never knew you. In other words, if their hope is not in the saving sufficiency of Jesus, then elder brothers will be as lost as any person who wanders from God and lives an awful life. The question is, why does the father freely give 1/3 of his inheritance to the younger son? And then the more practical question behind that is, are we called to allow others to sin against us? I think what this shows, when the father gave 1/3 of his estate, is unprecedented. I mean, I think Keller said in the video that you would drive a boy out like that with blows, and you'd relieve him from maybe ever having any of the estate, something like that. But he gave it to him because I think it shows the nature of God and letting people receive the gifts that He gives without ever having to trust Him. I mean, people are doing this all the time. This is how we live as sinful people. There are millions and billions of people in the world taking advantage of the benefits of God's world, the beauty and the relationships and the pleasures and the humor and the artistic creativity and so forth, without ever acknowledging that he's behind it. And so in a sense, God is giving people a share of the estate, you might say, and letting them squander it. This is going on all the time. The question is, are we called to allow others to sin against us? That's a pretty tricky question, because in some ways the answer is yes, if you take Jesus seriously when he says turn the other cheek if you're hit, which does involve some passiveness in terms of how Christians respond to injustice. On the other hand, I don't think any Christian should lay down and become a willing doormat so someone can abuse them or hurt them. And I would put this in the context of a domestic situation where a wife, let's say, is being abused by her husband. We would never tolerate that. We would want to come and rescue someone in a situation that is being abused willingly and sort of without any consequences. That is not acceptable. So allowing others to sin against us is true only in a certain context of suffering for your faith. But if you're being abused as a person or because of your personhood, I think that's intolerable. You shouldn't let that happen. I was asked the question, which son was I when I was growing up? And I think I mentioned in church that I was the younger son for a while because I ran off and kind of lived in the party world. And I didn't have a hatred toward God or any kind of a intellectual argument against his existence. I didn't struggle with that. I just wanted to live my own life and do my own thing. And at the end of my sophomore year, I realized that was going nowhere. And so I actually gave my life to Christ. And then since then, I've struggled more with being an older brother, like all of us do, and judgmentalism and pride and sort of condescension toward people who maybe are not anywhere near where I am in terms of spiritual understanding. And God has to forgive me for that every day in repentance. Christ's message was meant for both the irreligious and the moralistic. The church seems to only be reaching the moralistic. Do you think this is a sign that we're doing something wrong? Keller did mention, and I said this in church the other day, that the average traditional conservative church is ministering to a shrinking market of people who have a moralistic or traditional type background. And I don't think the answer for that is for a guy like me to start acting like a non-traditionalist and putting on some kind of performance and living outside who I am and how I've lived. But I do think we are becoming more secular, more anti-Christian in our culture. And it's going to require ministering to people in ways that traditionalism may not really answer. And that's kind of a whole subject in and of itself. But I don't think that we are very good at reaching non-traditional type people because our current structures are set up to appeal to more traditional people that already sort of have the values and understand the language and so forth. And I think we do better at Wildwood maybe than in some places because I think we can kind of laugh at ourselves a little bit about it. We don't take ourselves that seriously. But I think that something is going to have to happen in newer generations of people to be able to reach their own culture and not lose or compromise the message of the gospel. Yeah, the question is, can you give an example of being an elder brother? Well, elder brothers are critical, they're proud, they're very judgmental. You can see it in the story. You can see the bitterness that he exhibited when his younger brother came back. They despise the grace of God in people's lives. And what Keller says in his book, I think, is very helpful. He says elder brothers sort of believe they've earned or deserve all the benefits and privileges of being in the Father's house. But see, Christianity is not God giving us things because we've earned them. or because we've merited them. We're given gifts out of grace. So if things happen in our lives that are difficult, sickness, job problems, relational setbacks, children that rebel, elder brother types get very angry because they think that God has not kept his end of the bargain. This is the word of the elder brother: I've never disobeyed you, this kind of thing. And so he was angry that the grace of God was being spent on the younger brother instead of him being able to have it all for himself. So elder brothers are in the church all over the place, aloof, condemning. They lack understanding for the plight of other people. The elder brother had no sympathy for his younger brother. Keller says that the elder brother is the one who should have gone to look for him, and he didn't get that. We have an elder brother that came and looking for us. So those are some of the qualifications or some of the characteristics of an elder brother. What practical steps can we take to change from being elder brother types? I think we have to, instead of trying hard not to be proud or trying hard not to be critical, we have to understand the grace of God in our own lives. If we're not aware of the depths of his mercy toward us, that we've been saved by the sheer kindness of the Lord, we're not going to understand grace. It's only the people that have understood what they've been saved from that have any chance of escaping elder brother type mentalities. But it's not easy because all of us sink back into judgmentalism and criticism and cynicism and condemnation of people who we think have not lived up to, say, our standards, or who make foolish decisions, and we think that they're to blame for all of those. And they may be, but the point is we're still not called to hate them or despise them. Grace is the only thing that I think makes you overcome that. Is it possible for a true believer to have some characteristics of the elder brother lostness? I think this whole conversation points to the answer being yes. Every one of us struggles with judgmentalism, criticalness, pride, frustration at the failures of other people, anger toward them, anger toward our own circumstances when life doesn't go well. And these are things that are constantly being battled. What we want to make sure is not happening is that when the Father comes out and appeals to us, that we actually understand that we need to go into the house and celebrate the goodness of the Father toward the lost younger brother. And if we're not doing that, then we never do that, then I don't know whether we have the life of Jesus within us. And one of the ways that would be, I think, demonstrated is if you can't forgive people. If you're not able to tell the Lord that you're moving toward forgiveness, you should forgive, you must forgive, even though it's painful, even though it's difficult. If you're not willing to do that, then I wonder how much grace is in you. And I think Jesus told us a parable about that too, called the unforgiving servant. Both sons were alienated from the father. He extended grace to both of them, pleaded with the older brother to come into the house and celebrate the return of the younger brother. At the end, who is reconciled? Well, the interesting thing is the man of moral rebellion is reconciled, and the older son, the man of moral rectitude, is lost, as far as we can tell, because there's no end to the story. The story just concludes without an ending, without any resolution to the elder brother's resistance to the father's overtures. And I think Jesus intended it this way because the audience that was hearing this story were the Pharisees and scribes. If we lose sight of that, then we lose sight of the whole meaning of this parable. So that's the twist, that the bad man is saved and the good man is alienated from the Father. That's a very, very serious thing, and I think a warning to those of us who depend on our own righteousness. So I hope this is helpful a little bit to explain some of the questions that came out of our series here a couple of weeks ago. And if you have any more questions, any concerns as a result of seeing this video, or at least part of it, then please call the office. We're always glad to talk to our friends and members and those people who attend Wildwood, because we want us all to understand the depths of the grace of God in our lives. And so if you're interested, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.